Is Deepwoken actually ruined? Ooh boy, we're coming in with a spicy topic today. Hey, hello, how do you do everyone? Starry Z here, and we are talking about, like, the actual fundamentals of Deepwoken today. We're not talking about a concept, we're not talking about any actual new content that's in the game right now. Rather, we're talking about the actual fundamentals of the game as it currently stands, and if it's actually broken. Now, what actually inspired me to make this video was actually two videos I saw recently. Or I guess three. The first one you'll have probably seen floating around YouTube is Deepwoken is Ruined, which obviously is the main inspiration for this video. The Dan VR video talking about the actual current balance of the game. And then another thing, which is just like a little side thing, it's like drama with the mods. I don't really care for it, I just know like, if mods are abusing, that's just, come on man, really? Either way, not going to sidetrack too much like with my other videos. I don't want to ramble on too far. I actually have like a list here of stuff I want to talk about. So this is probably going to be a longer video, but it's not going to be me sidetracking and rambling on and on a lot. Like, honestly, this is the most I'm going to ramble. So, is Deepwoken ruined? Is it actually ruined? It's complicated. At least to me it's complicated, because keep in mind, like, I'm pretty sure a majority of the player base, or a lot of the player base, actually do PvP, but me and another large chunk of the community actually do a lot more PvE content than we do PvP. So it's hard for me to say what the actual problems with PvP is, but from what I'm hearing everyone saying, and from my own understanding of the old systems of Deepwoken since I was actually around during that time, it's complicated. Like, the main issue right now is, again, the main combat system of Deepwoken and how it stands. When Deepwoken first released, it had this mechanic called a reservoir, and how it worked is when you ran out of Aether, if you were in PvP, you would actually regenerate Aether faster if you had Reservoir. However, that mechanic got replaced with Aether. Now, I'm not going to say which mechanic was better, but it was Reservoir, alright? Like there's no cutting it. Reservoir was a much better mechanic, and I don't care if people are saying, oh, but parry trades is such a huge problem back then. Let's be real, 90% of the player base, like, was not having that big of a problem with parry trades. You were not good enough to be having a parry trade for that long of a time. And additionally, if the problem was parry trading, right? The actual problem was parry trading. Not like super long combos like we have now with current Deepwoken, but rather just parry trades being unreasonably long. What does venting solve? Venting being a thing that pushes people away. It doesn't like stop you from parry trading. Like, if you can parry vents, you can block events, and even if you land a vent, it just pushes people away slightly. So literally, it feels more like it was made for the current system of Deepwoken, where combos reign supreme. And actually, speaking of the older combat system and the newer one, the way I see it, the older combat system was much better for the actual combat of Deepwoken, like player versus player. That actually felt more fun, more rewarding, and more skill-based. Who could parry better? Who could feint better? Who can trick their opponent into actually getting hit? Like, stuff like that. The combat was more clean than it is nowadays, right? Like, you don't have people spamming a million mantras back then unless they were going specifically a mage build, and only a mage build. And let's be real, because of the current system, every build is essentially a mage build unless you're going specifically Silent Heart, which can't use mantras. Because let's be real, Reservoir, Tempo, or not Reservoir, huh? Tempo, that gives you so much Aether. People are always saying, oh, it gives you so much Aether. Oh, you have so much Aether you can use. You're never going to run out of Aether, especially if you're a mage build. And as someone who runs mage builds, yeah, I can confirm, you almost never run out of Aether, because you're always going to build up Aether in some way, shape, or form, especially with Reservoir. Basically, when trying to solve one issue, which wasn't really that big of an issue to begin with, they ended up creating a whole nother issue, which was mantra spam. The whole meta revolving around mantra spam. Now, I'm not going to talk about the meta too much, because again, I don't do PvP. This is not my field of expertise, but from what I understand, it is much more annoying and much harder to get into the PvP side of the game, simply because of the way the mechanics are changed and how the skill ceiling is a lot harder than it was before. And the skill floor, I'm just going to call skill floor, skill ceiling, whatever. It's a lot higher than it used to be before, and it's a lot harder to actively get into PvP and PvE because of the constantly changing meta. Speaking of which, the new meta sucks. Like, I don't mean like the specific meta for this week, because let's be real, the meta is going to change next week with the next update. I mean like the current meta in general. Basically, no one build is ever going to be the best forever. And like, I wouldn't mind it if it was like, oh, this one build's gonna be like the top for like quite a while. And like, you know, sometimes it may be annoying, but it's just like, no, this build's like the best, or like these types of builds are just the best for a short while. No, it's literally every single week. Every single week the meta changes because the developers decide to nerf what was the most powerful last week, either introduce a new thing that's much more broken or simply as broken but isn't as playtested, so it's just like you replace the old broken meta with a new broken meta. It's just a constantly endless, never-ending cycle. But what if a new overpowered thing doesn't come out? Well, people find another thing that was overpowered because it wasn't play-tested as well, or was play-tested or was balanced, but hey, they didn't do their job well enough, so it is broken anyways! Which brings me to another topic. Do the balancers actually do their job? Like, I don't want to blame the balancers, nor do I want to blame the devs. Like, really, the only evidence we have is just, like, stuff comes out broken way too often. Now, you could argue that just because, like, weekly updates, they have to update the game weekly and just fix things, which is not the case, but, like, that's my opinion. I think weekly updates are bad for the game, but that's a video for another day. I don't really want to point fingers over who's doing stuff worse. Is it the balancers? Is it the testers? Are the balancers just lazy? Are the testers just lazy? Are the actual developers themselves not doing their job correctly? Because, like, I'm pretty sure I was told, and I'm not sure if this is a rumor, but when the Pyre Keeper released, that was actually rushed through the testing phase, or probably even skipped the testing phase just so the weapon could get into the game in overpowered state. I'm not sure if that's a rumor or it's like actually true, which is why I don't want to point fingers. And also the fact that I also met someone who claimed to be a tester, but basically they just said, hey, so fun fact, I actually got kicked from the testing team because I actually found too many things that was wrong with the game. Like, they were doing their job way too well. And, like, again, I'm not sure if that's true. Again, I don't want to point fingers at all. I don't want to point fingers at anyone, but, like, as it stands, as, like, what I've seen, it's probably more likely leaning to the developers actually being lazy, but I don't really want to say that, because, like, again, I don't have all the evidence. I'm not a tester, I'm not a developer, so I really don't know. But it's just really strange that a lot of broken stuff comes out. Like, again, the Pyre Keeper came out, and like the fact that almost every single legendary weapon in the game sucks to fight against except for like a few. Like, hey, there's some with some really cool mechanics, like, ooh, this is a heavy weapon that's actually a railgun. Like, that's cool, that's fun. The Green Sudaruska, it builds up like charges and then releases an ice crystal above. Is it the most broken thing? No, not really, but like it can definitely give ice mages an advantage, or just players who use ice magic. It definitely gives them advantage over other players. Area denial. The Hero Blades is also another great example because like their whole gimmick was their unique criticals. They were like the first legendary weapons in the game, apart from like the Curved Blade of Winds and I forgot what the Shadow legendary was called. But even then, those are also great examples of good legendary weapons, because it's just like their whole gimmick is either with the Curved Blade of Winds, you either like wield the weapon one-handed or two-handed and that actually changes the critical and actually changes your playstyle, or with the Shadow legendary, it actually, if you land your critical, you actually like bring them back to the place you landed the critical at. So basically just like locking your opponent in one place to land more shadow mantras or melees, basically trapping your opponent. Meanwhile, the other legendary weapons, except like Light's Final Toll, because like that's also a fine one, but it's like it's not as good as it used to be anymore, so I'm not really going to count that. It definitely deserved the nerf though. The rest of the legendary weapons just feel like they gave them criticals without a mechanic in mind. Like, a gimmick of the legendary weapon shouldn't be just, oh hey, we have lots of criticals. The gimmick of the legendary weapon should be something the weapon actually does, and some of them get close to it, but ever since like weapons got multiple types of critical attacks, it just felt like the gimmick should be, hey, what should like these weapons criticals be, instead of just like, hey, what mechanic could we give this weapon? You know? Which kind of feels more like laziness rather than a balancing issue, but it's also just like the weapons can't come out really broken or just annoying to fight on release, and it's going to be hard to actually fundamentally change the weapon completely. Because like, if you have a weapon, right, that's like, its whole point is just like, hey, look at all the criticals I can do, and you can't really nerf them or give them new criticals altogether, because I don't know how to explain it. Like, I'm struggling here to just talk about the legendary weapons. Jesus. And another thing from the is Deepwoken Ruin video is the fact that, again, every build is essentially a mage build. Yeah, because of the whole reservoir thing. I'm not sure if I talked about that, but that does seem like a bit of a problem, where before you had like a lot of people who had a lot of varying types of builds, like attunementless builds, builds where it's just like, it was just their melee weapon, or it's just like, there was some like variety with everyone's build. Hell, even assassin builds were probably more prevalent back then. But because of the whole reservoir thing, every build just became a mage build with a little side thing. Like, there's a lot less variety with all of this Deepwoken builds. All of the Deepwoken builds being created, all of the new metas being added. Like, it's just far different from when the game first released, and I actually think like builds were much more better back then, right? Because again, the game was built around reservoir and not tempo, and the fact that tempo's in the game now, and the game's being balanced around tempo, that's actually causing a lot of problems, and I think like some of the main reasons PvP isn't as fun for people anymore, or it's just harder to get into because of how the introduction of tempo basically rewrote how the game is basically played. Like, it's like trying to replace the original building blocks of the game. Does that make sense? Am I explaining things well? Like, because of the current meta of the game, it feels like the game is transitioning to be more like a Battlegrounds anime-inspired game. Like, I don't mind flashy moves. Like, literally earlier this week, I was quite literally talking about how domains would be a fun expansion to the game. Because, like, to an extent, it would be a fun extension to the game, but I can also understand why people would be worried because of the current state of the game and how annoying mage builds are to fight already, and how annoying just magic and PvP is already, especially with the release of Blood Rend, where it's just like moves are dealing a lot of damage, the entire attunement is combo based, which again, you know how I feel about combo based attunements. Being that they're not that fun to fight, in the current state of Deepwoken, it's just like, that's the meta, because the meta is almost always going to be some form of metal, or thunder, or gale, because those are the attunements best for making combos. But other than that, like, I can enjoy PvP, because I do actively enjoy, like, in the Is Deepwoken video Ruin, I do actually enjoy doing PvP when I'm a lower level and fighting another lower level, because we actually have the same moveset, utilities as each other, or rather just like weaker versions of our full build, so we actually are on more equal grounds rather than if we're both on like at our full power and someone has a clear advantage because someone messed up and got a full combo off. Ugh. But also PvE is still like a lot of fun for me, because like the current state of Deepwoken, how like we're getting a lot more mantras that are just like multi-hitting base or just like build-up base are fun for builds like Frost Straw or Iron Sting, which is two of my favorite attunements to make PvE builds with because of, again, Impaler and Glass Dancer. Like if you haven't tried those for PvE, I would highly suggest trying them out. Like, generally, those are fun, and you can absolutely shred enemies with that. But that's besides the point. I don't think Deepwoken itself, it's ruined, but if it keeps going down the path it's going down, weekly updates, terrible, poor balancing, and just everything in between, like just not taking a step back to actually look at the current state of the game and rework things to actually make a better overall game and better overall experience, I definitely see Deepwoken slowly losing its player base over time due to the fact that Deepwoken isn't the game it once was before, nor is it the game that was originally meant to be exploration and magic not being everywhere. Like literally, in the lore of Deepwoken, it was literally stated, hey, the main reason the drowning happened was because everyone was abusing the song. And if you look at the current state of Deepwoken, it looks like we're gonna have a second drowning soon. Oh my god. Yeah, that's about all I have to say. That's about all I have to ramble about. I am curious to hear y'all's opinion on whether or not Deepwoken's ruined. And like, if you had one day, like this is your assignment for the day, in the comments, I want you to say, if for one singular day, you had the ability to change, like, everything and anything about the current Deepwoken, I just want you to, like, write that down. Like, a paragraph, a single sentence, I don't care, I just want to hear it. Huh, my phone alarm went off just on time. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing the video, because it helps out small content creators like me. Anyways, that's all I have to say. Tune in next time when I complain about weekly updates, probably.